building a better Bay Area. Moving forward, finding solutions. This is ABC 7 News.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I'm Amma Dates. You are watching Getting Answers live on ABC 7, Hulu Live, and wherever you stream. We are asking experts your questions every day at 3 to get answers for you in real time. And we are now just a few days away from the new year, and you know what that means. Time to start thinking about those resolutions, if you make them. A Stanford School of Medicine professor says it's key to be mindful of the goals you set so you can have a better routine in 2022. We're going to get his expert advice coming up at 3:20. But first, there's a lot to cover about the COVID-19 pandemic, as always. It appears Christmas became the super spreader event experts feared, with new cases outpacing the summer surge we saw from the Delta variant. ABC 7 News special correspondent Dr. Alok Patel is a member of our vaccine team. He is tracking the case count and all the headlines that you need to know. Dr. Patel, great to see you. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you as well. I hope everyone in your house is happy, safe, and healthy, and coping as best as possible in this now second dystopian holiday season we're having.
It's just great. Was it baby's first Christmas? Baby's first COVID safe as well, Christmas?
It was. And you know, to be honest, like, we still had a great time, and we still had a Christmas dinner. We had family come over, but we took all the safety protocols, the things we've been talking about. We had a conversation with every single person who was here about exposures, vaccination status, and the appetizer course were all rapid antigen tests. I am not joking.
Love it. You know, out on the platter with your champagne. Here is your COVID test. I love it.
No champagne until you pass that test.
That's perfect. That's perfect. All right, so let's do our first round of 2 truths and a lie. Am I even going to get this? The viewers, you have to help me with this. Okay, viewers, help me identify which of these statements is incorrect. Number 1, for the 20th week in a row, more than 100,000 children have tested positive for SARS-CoV-2. Number 2, the new CDC guidelines have separate recommendations for vaxxed versus unvaxxed, only for post-exposure guidance. Number 3, the FDA says antigen tests have held up their sensitivity in detecting Omicron. Okay, so I'm going to go through
getting tricky. We're getting tricky.
I know. I feel like there's some wording is key here. I think number 3 is true. I think that is true. I think it's still the right sensitivity. It just depends on when you take the test. If you have, if there's enough in you to give that positive result. Number 2, I'm questioning. Separate recommendations only for post-exposure. I feel like that could be the one. I feel like it's also separate before exposure. So I'm going to guess, I don't know, producer, do we have any?
Dude, the audience going to chime in and help
me on 2. Okay, I feel confident now that we've polled the viewers that we're going with number 2. Final answer.
So number 2 is actually true.
Shoot.
And, I'm going to be honest, like, this is actually part of the criticism of the new guidelines, is that there is not a differentiation for actual positive tests. This is just related to the exposure. So if you look at the CDC guidelines, they say, hey, if you're exposed to somebody else who has tested positive for SARS-CoV-2 and you're vaccinated and boosted, you know what? You might be completely fine. Just wear a mask and be careful. But if you're unvaccinated, you should actually quarantine yourself for 5 days. Whereas if you test positive, there's no distinction between people who are vaccinated or unvaccinated, which is a little tricky right now, and I'm sure we'll get more into those guidelines. But A is actually true, and A is unfortunate that we're continuing to see so many positive tests in the pediatric population. And I'm looking at my phone right here. But C is also, C is false. The FDA actually released a statement today saying that they think that the sensitivity is slightly lower. So if you have symptoms and you get a negative antigen test, it's best to go and repeat that test.
Okay.
Maybe next day, maybe a couple of days, just to make absolute sure.
That's what I was going to say. How quickly? Is it just that, is a day enough?
It's tricky. Omicron is behaving slightly differently than Delta, in that some of these studies are showing that people are getting symptoms a little bit faster, and in some cases, actually developing symptoms prior towards when you have enough of a viral load to test positive in a PCR or an antigen test. So you really do have to take that into account if you have an exposure, or if you yourself are kind of wake up feeling under the weather. Take into account what time you're taking that test. And remember, an antigen test, if you can get your hands on one, should be taken right before a potential gathering where we're going to see people. You want to, that's like a snapshot in time. You want to take it right before you walk in the door of a gathering.
Yeah, and I think that's good to point out, because I always assumed, well, if you have the sore throat and you take the test and it's negative, it should be negative, but you still may need to wait even if you're having symptoms. That's, yeah, something to keep in mind.
And also to keep in mind that if you have a sore throat and you test negative, you could also have influenza or something else that can get other people sick. So you probably should just stay home if you're not feeling well.
That is a good point. Even if it's not COVID, you should probably stay home. So, okay, you're a pediatric expert. You have a little one at home. So let's start by talking about the rise in pediatric cases. Hospitalizations in children are up 35% in just the past week. How concerned are you?
I'm concerned by the sheer number of positive cases, but I'm going to be completely transparent. It is reassuring to see kind of this early evidence that these Omicron cases appear to be more mild than what we had seen in the past. But Amma, the concern is when we have 100,000 positive tests for SARS-CoV-2 week after week, you inevitably will have more hospitalizations, more really sick children who are at risk of things like the post-inflammatory condition, long COVID, or passing it on to somebody else who is higher risk. You know, the big concern right now with Omicron is the unknown, and the unknown is how this is going to affect those who are most vulnerable, like children who are not yet vaccinated, the elderly, people who are high risk, people who are unvaccinated in general, or those young kids who aren't eligible at all. And that's what we're really worried about. And the last thing that we want to see is more shutdowns. I shouldn't say last thing, but we definitely do not want to see more shutdowns, more lockdowns. So it's really important that we get a grip on this. We test, we protect our kids to keep those schools open and keep them safe.
Yeah, and speaking of school, we have about a week left before kids go back to school, a day or two into next week. What's your advice to parents, and should they be concerned about sending their kids back right after winter break?
You know, no matter what I say, parents are going to be concerned because guess what? That is parents' job to take care of your kids. And I respect that. I think what parents should do, first of all, your child is eligible for the vaccine. There is no question at all that you should get your child the shot. Yes, it's going to take a few weeks for it to kick in, but here's the reality. The vast majority, including almost every single kid aged 5 to 11 who is hospitalized, and over 60%, according to data, of those 12 to 17 who are hospitalized are unvaccinated. So the vaccines are keeping kids out of the hospital. You want to get your kids the shot. And kids who are under than 5, you have to do everything you can to protect them by making sure that everyone surrounding them is vaccinated and they're being safe. And last but not least, check in with your school, your caretakers, your babysitters, your daycare centers, and look to see what their safety protocols are. Because from what I've heard, it differs depending on where you're at in the country, where you're at in the state.
Yeah, definitely. And let's talk about, for those of us who have kids who aren't 5 yet, do you think the rise in pediatric cases will incentivize the FDA to speed up emergency use of the vaccine for kids under 5? But then at the same time, you don't want to think that they're rushing through anything. So where does that stand?
Amma, you almost answered the question with the second part of your question. Is I don't think anybody wants to put in the air that the FDA is ever going to rush a process. Exactly. And actually, the setback the FDA had in terms of timing, based on the fact that the trials didn't show the right kind of immune response in that younger age group, not only was that a little bit disappointing, because some parents were really waiting to get those vaccines available for kids younger than 5, that should also build trust, because we're not planning on rushing anything. And no one on any committee, any expert vaccine committee, would recommend a shot they themselves would not give to their own children. And so in the meantime, you got to do what any parent out there with young kids is doing and protect them by having a conversation with everyone around them. My daughter is 8 months old. The way we kept her safe was by making sure everyone around her was aware of their exposure. They were getting tested and they're vaccinated. You're not vaccinated, you do not get to meet my daughter.
Yeah, that's funny. It's kind of what we did with the flu shot too. When we had a newborn, we had nanny candidates who said, maybe I don't believe in this flu shot. Well, good for you, but we are going to get somebody who is going to get their yearly flu shot. Oh, let's talk about being boosted, because new today, San Francisco has announced that workers in healthcare and other high-risk settings must be boosted by February 1st. Do you agree with this move?
I do agree with this move, and we've been calling, when I say we, I mean several people who work in public health, some infectious disease experts have been saying, hey, the data is clear now that fully vaccinated actually should mean all 3 shots. And we should just stop calling it 2 shots and a booster. And because we know that all 3 shots together are providing the efficacy that we need to kind of really, really push off this variant. And I think it's important that we actually define that. And now that all 3 shots, if it's considered fully vaccinated, this might give those businesses the ability to regulate them and mandate them. And that's important in a setting like healthcare where you're coming in contact with a lot of positive SARS-CoV-2 cases on a daily basis. I myself do, and I'm thankful that I'm boosted, aside from obviously having all the PPE.
Okay, we have less than a minute before break for this next question, but the CDC put out new numbers showing that the U.S. has shattered its daily COVID-19 case record. So the nation's now averaging more new infections than at any point in the pandemic. What does this indicate about Omicron?
Well, this indicates, quite simply, the transmissibility and how contagious Omicron is, combined with the fact that people are getting complacent and they're getting out there. But the important thing to know, though, is that we have not shattered the hospitalization record or the death record. So case rates alone are not necessarily coupled to a rise in hospitalizations. Yes, we broke the record in January, but we have not hit a hospitalization peak, which is a good thing because case rates are not going to go to zero. This is going to become endemic. We're going to have to learn how to live with coronavirus. And so it's important that we look at case rates, but then we also realize that there's context to it as well.
All right, endemic, that word. We are going to talk about that after the break, as well as New Year's celebration. So stay with us. Our conversation with Dr. Patel will continue after this quick break.
Cool. We're not doing the
Okay, we are back with ABC 7 News special correspondent Dr. Alok Patel, and we do want to start with another round of two truths and a lie. You handle them this time, Doctor.
Right on. So here we go. Everyone tell me which one of these is not true. Amma is a brilliant human being, but viewers, we want to hear from you as well. So is it A, the CDC reported more than 4,500 cases of the flu last week, which is up from 2,500 cases from 2 weeks prior? Or is it B, test positivity is rising in San Francisco and is directly coupled with hospitalizations? Or is it C, 2 Republican lawmakers have been fined combined more than $100,000 for violating mask rules? Which one of these is not true?
I think it's 2. I think it's B. We sort of just talked about that a little bit. Test positivity is up, but fortunately it sounds like not as many people are being hospitalized. And I know that the flu cases, we've been talking about that more. So I think 1 is true and 3 is true. What are the viewers saying? Okay, they agree with me again, but we were wrong last time. What is it, Dr. Patel?
So you were all right this time,
Yes.
and we did kind of give it away, but hey, I'm not going to even pretend like we gave it away. I'm just going to pretend like you knew that.
Yes.
But, test positivity is rising in California. But again, that's just one metric. And this could be by virtue of the fact that the Omicron is a more mild variant. We also have vaccinations all over the place. But also remember, we still don't know what could really happen when the unvaccinated get hit. We're still seeing hospitalizations. We shouldn't normalize that. But it is good news to see that it's not necessarily coupled. We may see a spike, a holiday spike in January, and hopefully it goes down after that. A is true, and it's important to remember that influenza still hospitalizes a lot of people. So you haven't yet gotten your flu shot. That is extremely important. And C, ridiculous, true. This is Andrew Clyde and Marjorie Taylor Greene, who a lot of people know for her COVID conspiracy antics, have been fined this much money by refusing to wear masks in Congress. These are both representatives. And the reason I even included this one is the CDC guidance for those who are unvaccinated. It says, hey, after 5 days of isolation, if you test positive, you should wear a mask. There's a little bit of an honor system and self-policing involved there. And people out there just have to trust that the average individual is going to do the right thing. I'm a little bit skeptical.
Yeah, it's hard. Well, and at this point, it's hard to follow what the rules, recommendations, what you're supposed to be doing. It changes, and now it's whether you're vaccinated, unvaccinated, then maybe you should be following the vaccinated, but then you have a kid who's not vaccinated because they're too young. It's a lot to follow.
It really is. And I mentioned earlier that I wish the CDC would have included a separate kind of clause for people who are unvaccinated versus vaccinated, but also what a lot of experts are criticizing the CDC guidance and saying there should be a clear recommendation about getting a negative test to truly know that you are no longer contagious. Yeah. And also there should be some recommendations about which mask you should be wearing, not simply just saying mask. And then the CDC obviously defended themselves this morning, but the flip-flopping of information is really giving people a hard time of trying to figure out which information they should follow.
Yeah, so what kind of mask should we be wearing? Not the cloth?
We should be up. The cloth masks, I stand by people who have said they're better than nothing, but people really should be stepping it up and wearing the N95s, the KN95s, even a 3-ply surgical mask. It's going to provide you a little bit more protection. And, the CDC came out and said, hey, we're just trying to do something that people are going to agree with, because a lot of members of the population right now don't even want to wear a mask.
Right.
And so if you say you must wear a KN95, they will rebuttal and say, I don't want to wear a mask at all. Yeah. And so it's difficult, but this is common ground that we're going to have to find this upcoming year. We cannot do this for a third year.
Yeah, it is rough. And I want to get back to that third year coming up. But first, let's talk about the holiday coming up, New Year's Eve. We're hearing about a lot of cancellations. Even, San Francisco has now canceled the fireworks for a second year in a row. Do you think that's still necessary?
I have a hard time seeing why the outdoor events are being canceled. I understand it's with an abundance of caution until we really truly know everything that we're predicting regarding Omicron. I understand, it's hard to see yet another celebration canceled, but I think it's important that we just put out a message that people should be careful, kind of avoid those large gatherings, or just, avoid a gathering if you can't really verify if everyone around you is vaccinated or what their exposure status is. And so in that sense, I understand, but it is hard to see these outdoor celebrations scaled down.
Yeah, I want to talk. We have about a minute and a half left. There are some experts who are saying that next year could be the end of the pandemic, or when the pandemic becomes an endemic. First, explain the difference to people, and do you agree?
Simply put, you'll see a lot of qualitative definitions about when we're going to transition to becoming endemic. And aside from the daily infection tolls and what it's doing in terms of hospitalizations and deaths, it really comes down to whether or not the infection is controlled. And part of that has to do with, are we going to still have an overburdened healthcare system? And I think that is going to be the limiting factor of when we're able to transition into an endemic phase. We're still seeing overrun hospitals. And it's not just because of COVID-19. It's also because of this moral injury and burnout we're seeing in healthcare professionals. So I think that's going to be the last kind of checkbox before we can fully transition into being endemic. But hey, we've got vaccines, we've got treatments, and we're going to start to have a lot more vaccine and natural immunity. So hopefully we can have the endemic conversation and go back to living our normal lives soon. But that is on the individual. So if you want to see this virus turn into an endemic one, you all know what to do.
Yeah, we know, doctor. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time. As always a pleasure to chat with you. And we hope you have a fabulous new year. I'm sure we'll talk to you in, I don't know, day or two next week.
Amma, likewise. I will see you in 2022, which is going to be a brighter year with hopefully less Greek letters in headlines.
Let's hope for that. Thank you, Dr. Patel. And we will be right back with a Stanford professor who will share his advice for being more mindful in the new year. Well, we are just days away from 2022, and the new year means new laws in California, and they're likely to impact you and your family. ABC 7 News anchor Jabina Fortson has a preview.
Every year, new laws are approved in the hopes of tackling the problems we see here in California. So here are some that'll take effect in 2022 that might affect you. More private controlled fires will help clear overgrowth that fuels the wildfires here in California. A new bill reduces the legal liability for burn bosses, which are people who do prescribed burns. On New Year's Day, the minimum wage increases to $15 across the Golden State for businesses with 26 or more employees, and $14 per hour for those with 25 or fewer workers. Slow down, everybody. Cities are given new authority to reduce speed limits to keep pedestrians and cyclists safe. Current limits are based on speeds drivers feel comfortable driving rather than what's actually safe. Hooray for cocktail hour. Pandemic privileges have been extended, but not fully in this next bill. Orders for mixed drinks can be placed online, by phone, or in person, but must be picked up. Delivery of cocktails ends on December 31st. And finally, some good news for those waiting to see a therapist. Insurance companies and health plans will be required to provide timely follow-up care and reduce wait times for patients seeking care for mental health and substance abuse issues. And that is our wrap for some of the new laws. Have a safe and happy New Year.
All right, so a lot of people strive for New Year's resolutions to help look forward to 2022. If you're still trying to come up with yours, how about being more mindful? One expert says that's key to building a better daily routine for the new year. Joining us to explain that theory and how we can all put it into practice is Stanford School of Medicine professor and mindfulness expert Greg Hammer. Thank you for being here, Greg.
Such a pleasure to be with you.
All right, so first tell us exactly what mindfulness is.
Mindfulness was defined by one of the founders of what we call mindfulness these days, and that's Dr. Jon Kabat-Zinn, one of my real heroes. Dr. Kabat-Zinn defined mindfulness as awareness of the present moment on purpose, non-judgmentally. So there are a few important pearls in there. One of them is awareness of the present moment, which is where happiness lives. Another one is that we do so on purpose. In other words, we have intention. We live with intention. And if we don't, if we simply default to the way our brains are wired, we're not going to be very present. We're going to be stuck in the past and fixated on the future. And the other thing is the idea of living without judgment, because our brains are always comparing and judging. And unfortunately, because of our negativity bias, we judge ourselves most negatively and harshly.
Oh, yeah, we do. So how do we break that cycle? What are some practical tips on how we can use mindfulness in everyday life?
Sure. Again, it's about being aware of what's happening in this moment right now. And as our brains are wired to be stuck in the past and future, the good news is we have this quality called neuroplasticity. That means with intention and having a daily practice, we can actually rewire our brains to be more present, less judgmental, and therefore happier. And the method that I practice and teach is called GAIN, which stands for gratitude, acceptance, intention, and non-judgment. And I think these are the four pillars of mindfulness and happiness, in fact.
Yeah, and you actually have a book called Gain Without Pain, the Happiness Handbook for Healthcare Professionals. So if somebody wants to start mindfulness in the new year, what's a simple way, a little thing they can do just to get started? Because it can seem overwhelming. How am I just suddenly supposed to be mindful?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, there's no such thing as failure. Everything is in baby steps. Our brains became wired to function the way they do over decades. And so we're not going to change that overnight. All we can hope for is taking baby steps and making steady progress. And so my recommendation is to start the day with gratitude. In fact, as I teach, we start our day with a very brief form of meditation. It can be as little as 3 minutes. We sit in a comfortable place with our eyes closed. We start to get in touch with our breath. We slow it down. And then we begin to contemplate that for which we're grateful. And I would submit that as bad a year as it has been for so many, it could have been worse. There still are many, many elements for which to be grateful. So focusing on gratitude is key.
Okay, we have about 30 seconds. So what else can you tell us?
Yeah. Well, it's also important to recognize that life is full of painful moments as well as joy. And so we need to accept those. And if we can lower our resistance and open our hearts and let that pain in and truly accept it, our suffering will be diminished. Third is the I in gain, intention. We live with the practice. We intend to be present and happy and positive. And then non-judgment. We can drop a lot of the judgments that we make.
Okay, and we're going to have to get to break. We do have to go to break, but we're going to keep you on our live stream and get that fourth one from you. So stay right here. If you're on TV, we will be right back. But for now, we are going to continue online. Okay, so we should be in break. So what's the fourth one? What's the N?
The N is non-judgment. And, you know, our brains are always evaluating our environment, comparing one thing to another. And unfortunately, we include ourselves in those comparisons. This person is smarter than I am. That person is taller than I am. And we're we have a negativity bias. So we judge ourselves very harshly. And the good news is, through this gain practice, we can learn to let go of judgments, including judging ourselves. So one key that I do in my own gain meditation, and that which I teach, is when I get to the N in gain, I think of the Earth, one of these beautiful NASA photographs. The Earth is suspended in space. It's neither good nor bad. And I think when we look at it that way, we would agree that the Earth intrinsically is not good and it's not bad. And once we accept that, we can look toward ourselves and recognize that we too are neither good nor bad. We simply are the person that we are. And I think this is a path to living with much less judgment and, again, gratitude, acceptance, intention, and non-judgment. Baby steps, 3-minute daily practice. We'll begin to use these principles in the rest of our day and our daily lives as well. And as the months go by, we'll look back and realize how much progress we've made and how much happier we are.
Yeah, we have about 30 seconds in the break. Your book for healthcare professionals, but I assume other people could benefit from it as well?
Absolutely. You know, the stories are rooted in medicine. I think that there are many anecdotes that the general public would find amusing and also useful. And so, yes, I think the book can be enjoyed by everyone. Working on a version for teenagers at the moment. And so gradually, hopefully, we'll get to other groups. But I think in the meantime, this book is something that most everyone would enjoy.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We wish you a happy new year filled with mindfulness, and you have a great day. We appreciate your time.
Likewise. My pleasure.
Right, take care. And we'll be back on air in just a second. All right, thank you so much for joining us on this interactive show, Getting Answers. We'll be here every weekday at 3 on air and on live stream answering your questions. World News Tonight is next, and then stay with us for ABC 7 News at 4. We'll see you then.